Rented a movie today. I watched Batman. You know, I don't picture Michael Keaton as Batman. You know who I'd like to see? That guy Tattoo from Fantasy Island. Oh, he'd be a great Batman. You walk up to him and go, hey, you're Tattoo. No, I am Batman. No, you're not. Oh, yes, I am. Do you have a Batmobile? I Bat Cordoba. I am Batman.
Good morning. It's Friday, Policecraft Friday, March the 8th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the patriotic song of the day, we will have patriotic shorts, motivation, Bishop Barron, Ayn Rand, the 33 strategies of war, and policecraft. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I should not change, the courage to change the things I should, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
When World War II was over, Uncle Sam said, boys, go home. No one had to twist my arm. I came back across the phone. Now things are in a mess again. The world is all agog. Old Joe Stalin in Moscow's eating too high on the hog. Mr. Stalin, you're eating too high on the hog. Mr. Stalin, quit feeding those lies to your mob. Now, Joe, you'd better change your way, or like Hitler, you will pay for eating too high on the hog. Joe's getting up in age, but they say he ain't so dumb. He knows all about ships and tanks and maybe atom bombs. If he keeps eating like he is, at his own discretion, one of these days he's gonna wake up with American indigestion. Mr. Stalin, you're eating too high on the hog. Mr. Stalin, quit feeding those lies to your mob. We know that you've got armies, and we know that they're big, but don't forget the ham is close to the tail end of the pig. Office boys, they came to the UN and made a lot of noise. They're only taking orders that come across from you, but your hammer and sickle just won't fit our red, white, and blue. Mr. Stalin, you're eating too high on the hog. Mr. Stalin, quit feeding those lies to your mob. Now listen, Joe, you know that you aren't used to eating meat. Act your age, be yourself, stick to Kremlin wheat. Mr. Stalin, you're eating too high on the hog. Mr. Stalin, quit feeding those lies to your mob. Now, we aren't hunting trouble, but we ain't never run. Let's all live and let live, Joe. Remember the rising sun? Quit eating too high on the hog.
Thank you. Now a little Mafia action.
That you were making how much?
We were bringing in $8 to $10 million a week at the height of the operation, selling 500 million gallons of gas a month, taking down 30 to 40 cents a gallon, depending upon what deal we made. It's a lot of money.
How are you laundering all that money?
Wasn't easy. We had a lot of cash in the beginning, and then when we switched over and we were collecting money through wires and everything, I had money in foreign accounts. We were moving it right out of the country.
I want you to sanction the hit on Ralph Cifaretto.
What? Are you kidding me?
Violated my wife's honor.
Ralph slept with Jenny?
He insulted her. He made a very insensitive joke about her body to some friends of ours.
What did he say?
Have to repeat it? The word's not good enough?
Not if you want him clipped over it.
He said she was having a 90-pound mole removed from her wrist. The implication was that her ass is so big she could have a mole that size removed from it.
It's an off-colored remark. It was highly inappropriate. You want? I'll demand he's taxed. But clip him?
Is it all just about money?
I'll crack him good. I'll ask for $200,000.
$200,000 for insulting my wife. What's next, come on? You get the for $1 million?
Who wants to good?
I'm making a point. I'm talking about my wife's honor here. My honor.
We depend on this guy. There are millions of dollars at stake. We can't afford it, John.
A room full of guys making fun of my wife. And you're not going to let me deal with this?
I get a call from the lieutenant. Come to the office. I go to the lieutenant, another guy. Fortunately, he liked me. Now, I'm not saying everybody liked me. There was some COs in there that, because I was a mob guy and had a reputation, they didn't like me at all. So he says to me, Mike, he says, what's going on with your visits? I said, Lieutenant, what do you mean? He says, I want to tell you this. You know how the inmates used to snitch you out in there? They'd put a note under the lieutenant's door. That's how they'd snitch you out. He said, I'm getting more notes on you, that you're getting more visits than everybody else. Do you know that some of these inmates were actually counting my visit points and then reporting me? That's what you got to deal with in there. So got to be very careful, got to keep to yourself, got to watch who's around you. I already told in another video 3 words that help you through prison. Please, thank you, excuse me. Told you everybody in there wants respect they didn't have out on the street. Things like that. You hit or you raise your hands to another made man, death.
Really?
Yeah. Can never raise your hands. Can't be disrespectful to one another. Well, it's part of the life, yes. I mean, I don't like people to get the impression that every day, we go around killing people and baseball batting people and doing that. That's not part of the life. When you take the oath, it's an oath of omerta, meaning silence. You're not even supposed to admit that the life exists. But as part of that life, obviously, you're a criminal. You do bad things. But it's not what you did every day. It wasn't your everyday life. But, and I don't ever try to justify it. The way we justified it, one of the horrors of that life, Pierce, you make a mistake. You violate the oath. How do you violate the oath? God forbid you violate another man's wife, daughter, sister, mother.
What would happen if you did?
Death. I had probably 300 gas stations. We had branded and unbranded stations. And what we would do is, let's say it was a mobile station, I'm just picking that out because we dealt with all of them. And we go to a station and say, how much are you paying for a gallon of gas? They say, I'm paying $1. Now, how would you like to pay 95 cents? Now, 5 cents is a big saving for you. I said, great. I said, I'll tell you what you do. How many loads a week are you getting from mobile? Oh, we're getting 6. All right. Buy 3 from them, buy 3 from us. We'll deliver in the middle of the night. We'll save you that. By the end of the day, they wanted to deliver. They wanted us to service them all. They didn't want to buy anything from mobile anymore. I said, you can't do that. You got to keep your brand. Nobody can compete with us. Finally, the grilling is over. Everybody's satisfied. I'll be honest with you, I just wanted to get out of there. I had it. I said, Jimmy, I got to drive out to Long Island. Drive me home. We get in the car, right, with Jimmy. We leave. I say goodbye to everybody. Everything's okay. We get in the car, and I'll tell you this. I was mad. I was about to turn around and really blast Jimmy. I mean, verbally blast Jimmy for not preparing me. I turn around, and I'm ready to give it to him, and he says, wait a minute, stop. Before you say anything, Michael, I got to tell you this. You held yourself pretty well in there tonight. It could have been a problem. And I looked at him, I got even more mad. I looked at him and I said, you know this? You knew it could be a problem? You drive me there? I know you all my life. We're friends. And you don't prepare me? You don't tell me? You don't prepare me at all? And he looked at me, and he knew the right answer. He looked at me and he says, well, let me ask you a question, Mike. If it was the other way around, would you have told me? It's clicking. Oh, Jerry Zimmerman, Mario, the argument they had in the yard. I'm starting to listen for a minute. I says, Mario, do me a favor. I says, I had a long ride in from Long Island. Let me use the restroom. I'll be right back. So I go out, and I see Jerry at the bar, and I said, Jerry, Mario's in the back, and he's not happy. I says, get out of here right away. Go wait for me down the street. I'll meet you after. So now I go back, and I says, Mario, what's the problem? He said, my brother-in-law brought his car in. It wasn't a bad car. He started cursing out my brother-in-law. He cursed me out. He says to me, and I want him dead. He said, that's it. No negotiation here. I says, Mario, I says, first of all, I got to tell you something. I said, I heard the whole argument. I was up in my office on the second floor. The window was open, and I listened to everything.
I said, Jerry never cursed at your brother-in-law, and he never said anything out of the way. Now, I'll be honest with you, people, I had to lie through my teeth. One thing in that life, at least in the Colombo family, we were not allowed to mess with drugs. The night I got inducted into the family, I was told straight out, you deal with drugs, you die. Remember in the Gotti movie when Carlo Gambino was talking to Armando Santi, John Gotti, and he said, no drugs, you deal with drugs, you die. You know what he said, very forcefully like that. Well, that was true in the Colombo family. We were not allowed to deal with drugs. And there were guys that were doing little drug deals here and there. It was happening. Now, let me tell you the backstory on this. Her husband, John Cordero, and her got into an argument at one point. This was prior to this. And she had said, I'm going to blow the whistle on you. I'm going to tell everybody that you framed Francis and all of that. Well, they were allegedly in an apartment when this happened. And he got so angry with her. This is not this is a maniac. That he took an axe and he started hitting her with an axe. An axe. She told me that night, she says, listen, if my husband finds out about this, he'll kill me. And if the FBI knows that I'm helping you, they'll hurt me. I'll be in trouble on both ends. So you got to be responsible for my protection and my welfare. I said, no problem.
And that was some Mafia action. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the patriotic shorts.
Why did snipers in the First World War shoot at the legs? During the First World War, a rule appeared among the snipers of the Russian army, first in the Caucasus and then on other fronts. The rule is unspoken. The snipers of the Russian army tried not to kill unnecessarily. They tried to shoot at the legs, at the knee, in the foot, in the hip. Of course, if the situation allowed. Well, first of all, they didn't take a sin on their soul. And secondly, if you kill an opponent, he will immediately die. But a seriously wounded soldier, he screams, moans, and thus exerts a very strong moral influence on his comrades.
On February 6, 1991, a pair of A-10 Warthogs struck two Iraqi tanks in Kuwait when one of the pilots detected unusual activity not far from their location. He made the decision to closely observe it by conducting an aerial survey at an altitude of 6,000 feet. Two Iraqi helicopters were observed in flight at that location. The Iraqis also detected the A-10, split up, and initiated evasive measures. The American pilot speedily set up his GAU-8 cannon, followed by the launch of an AIM-9. However, the missile experienced issues due to the high temperature of the desert sand. Afterwards, he fired 75 shots, none of which successfully made contact with the chopper. The pilot attempted another maneuver and fired a total of 100 rounds, but once again failed to hit the target. He proceeded to refocus his aim, firing a further 100 shots, though unfortunately failing to hit the target once more. After wasting around 275 rounds, the pilot fired an additional 100 rounds. This time, the pilot had success in targeting the helicopter, resulting in a detonation akin to a bomb impact.
This woman was awarded the highest honor for her heroic actions. How did that happen? On April 7, 2003, Captain Kim Campbell, a fearless female A-10 Warthog pilot, provided close air support for U.S. troops during a mission in Baghdad, Iraq. During the battle, she and her wingman made several passes in their A-10 Warthogs, firing rockets and 30mm bullets at the enemy. As the battle rages on, her aircraft is hit by a missile, causing severe damage. Most people would consider ejecting, but not Captain Campbell. So she does something unbelievable. She uses the backup flight system, which is a manual setup that requires sheer physical strength. Against all odds, she manages to steer her crippled jet back to safety, facing unimaginable challenges along the way. Her heroic actions that day earned her the Distinguished Flying Cross, the highest honor for heroism in the U.S. Air Force.
In Mexico, they've just elected a big, almost socialist.
Mexico has elected leftist candidate Andrés Manuel López Obrador as its next president.
Doubled the minimum wage. Is he a socialist?
He's a socialist, but now we have a new breed of socialism because after the disaster of Venezuela, nobody really dares to go just like one day with their finger and be like, seize this, expropriate that.
Expropiese.
They do it in a more subtle way, and this is what is happening in Mexico. For example, they banned the airport, which was one of the most important investment deals for Mexico in the next 50 years. But this guy is not as extreme as Hugo Chavez was, and that's why people say, well, this is not socialism, but it is. You already don't have free markets in Latin America, and then guys like this come and they just make it worse.
I was not sure whether I could kill a person, and I found in a ditch 28 of our servicemen with their hands tied behind their back and shot in the back of the head. And I changed my mind. I decided that I would never become a prisoner of war if I could help it. I had no doubts that I would then be killing the enemy.
So Russia is trying, but mostly failing, to sell its fourth-gen fighter, the Su-35 Flanker, to other countries. Deals with Egypt, Turkey, Algeria, and other countries all fell through, but it looks like Iran actually wants the planes. Now, some circles, they say that the Su-35 is the most overhyped fourth-gen fighter, but they are fast, they are maneuverable, and they can carry a lot of weapons. I mean, after all, they are made in Russia. But more than a few aircraft aficionados say the Flanker's flash is more of a fizzle if it's flying outside of an air show. Basically, they have bad avionics, cannot engage targets as well as other fourth-gen fighters. Against fifth-gen fighters like an F-22 or F-35, those Flanker pilots should either just eject immediately or stay on the ground. But Iran gave Russia a bunch of suicide drones to attack Ukraine, and they want something in return. And compared to the planes Iran's Air Force currently flies, Su-35s are an upgrade.
I had some individuals that came into the room that were expressing pity over the wounds that I had received, and just going ahead and writing me and other wounded warriors off that, you know, what a tragedy. We send these young men and women off to war, and then they come home broken, and they're never going to be able to, you know, realize their full potential or something along those lines. So when they left, my wife came back. I couldn't talk, you know, wired shut, trach, stomach tube, the works, and I could only write on a notebook. And I wrote to her, I said, nobody is going to come into my room and feel sorry for me. I refuse to feel sorry for myself. And I penned out that sign. And there wasn't a whole lot of thought that went into it. It was like just a stream of consciousness in the moment. And I told her to get the brightest piece of paper she could find and put it on the door. And I said, nobody's allowed in my room until they read this. And if they can't handle that, then tell them they're not allowed to come in.
Napoleon called him the bravest of the brave. His name was Michel Ney. His career was forged through extreme heroism and an unrivaled ability to inspire his troops. Ney was promoted to general in 1799 and proved his worth at the Battle of Hohenlinden. Having caught Napoleon's eye, he was promoted to marshal in 1804. At Friedland, the emperor dubbed Ney a lion for leading a decisive charge that routed the Russian flank. Ney's greatest moment came during the invasion of Russia, when his brilliant command of Napoleon's rear guard created a legend for all time. But his heroism could be marred by recklessness and tactical blunders. Most notoriously, his uncoordinated cavalry attacks at Waterloo may have cost Napoleon the battle. Fiercely loyal to France, Ney refused to flee after Napoleon's fall and was sentenced to death by the restored Bourbons. His final words of command were to his own firing squad.
One day they took us out to a big field. They said, there's going to be a demonstration today. We said, what kind of demonstration? Shut up and sit down. So we sit down. 3 C-47s come out of the sky, fly out in front of us in the field, and then we see the doors open, and we see guys throwing themselves out of the doors, and little white things open up, and they come floating down to the ground. You know, paratroops were brand new in World War II. They just getting started. And we see these guys get on the ground, roll up their chutes, come double timing across the field. They line up in front of us, and the captain comes by and says, all right, this is the United States Parachute Corps. We're looking for a few good men. You have to be a graduate of the infantry school and have all your advanced infantry training. Who wants to volunteer? But throw yourself out of an airplane? And he said, and there's $50 extra a month jump pay. That's how I ended up volunteering for the paratroops.
And that was the Patriotic Shorts. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little motivation.
Think happy thoughts. Think sunshine all the day. Refuse to let the trifling worries stay. Crowd them with thoughts of laughter from your mind. Think of the good, forget the bad you find. Think of the sun behind the clouds, the blue, and not the gray skies that you view. Think of the kindness, not the meanness shown. The true friends, not the false ones you have known. The joy, and not the hatred of the strife. The sweetness, not the bitterness of life. Think happy thoughts. Think happy thoughts. Think always of the best. Think of the ones you love, not those you detest. Think of your victories and not your failures here. The smile that pleased and not the hurtful sneer. The kindly word and not the harsh words spoken. The promise kept and not the promise broken. The good that you have known and not the bad. The happy days that were and not the sad. Think of the rose and not the withered flower. The beauty of the rainbow, not the shower. Think happy thoughts. Think happy thoughts. This is true happiness. That life is sad that feeds on its distress. That mind is gloomy that subsists on gloom, and is as dismal as a curtained room, where daily comes the sunshine, but to find it cannot enter through the close-drawn blind. Fling up the curtains of your mind today, and let the morning sunshine into play. Dwell on the joys and not the sorrows here. Master your thoughts, and you have mastered fear. Think happy thoughts. A friend is one who takes your hand and talks a speech you understand. He's partly kindness, partly mirth, and faith unfaltering in your worths. He's first to cheer you on success, and last to leave you in distress. A friend is constant, honest, true. In short, old pal, he's just like you. Rather win a brother's smile than a stack of dollar notes. Rather do one thing worthwhile than have all the nation's votes. Rather tread the simple way, where the sweet wild roses are, than to dress in glad array and be prince or king or czar.
Somehow, when I sum it up, I would rather be a friend than by force snatch victory's cup and be hated in the end. I would rather leave behind tender, gentle thoughts of me than have those who follow find stains upon my memory. Rather do the simple things, rather play a lowly part than to win the praise of kings and be cold and hard of heart. I would rather fail to be rich or famous on this earth, rather dwell in poverty if my deeds will tell my worth. Rather feel a brother's hand clasped in mine as friendship's vow, than in pomp and pride to stand with a crown upon my brow. Rather have one find me true than have thousands call me great and despise the things I do, turning from me in their hate. What do I want my boy to be? Oft is the question asked of me, and oft I ask it of myself. What corner, niche, or post or shelf in the great hall of life would I select for him to occupy? Statesman or writer, poet, sage, or toiler for a weekly wage? Artist or artisan, oh, what is to become his future lot? For him I do not dare to plan. I only hope he'll be a man. I leave it free for him to choose the tools of life which he shall use. Brush, pen, or chisel, lathe, or wrench, the desk of commerce, or the bench, and pray that when he makes his choice, in each day's task, he shall rejoice. I know somewhere there is a need for him to labor and succeed. Somewhere, if he can be clean and true, loyal and honest through and through, he shall be fit for any clan. And so I hope he'll be a man. I would not build my hope or ask that he shall do some certain task, or bend his will to suit my own. He shall select his post alone. Life needs 1,000 kinds of men, toilers and masters of the pen, doctors, mechanics, sturdy hands, to do the work which it commands. And wheresoe'er he's pleased to go, honor and triumph he may know. Therefore, I must do all I can to teach my boy to be a man. Edgar Albert Guest.
And that was a little motivation. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Daily Law for March the 8th.
March 8th. Retain your sense of wonder. Youth is happy because it has the capacity to see beauty. Anyone who keeps the ability to see beauty never grows old. Franz Kafka. After we pass through a rigorous apprenticeship and begin to flex our creative muscles, we cannot help but feel satisfaction in what we have learned and how far we have progressed. We naturally begin to take for granted certain ideas we have learned and developed. Slowly, we stop asking the same kinds of questions that plagued us earlier on. We already know the answers. We feel ever so superior. Unknown to ourselves, the mind slowly narrows and tightens as complacency creeps into the soul. And although we may have achieved public acclaim for our past work, we stifle our own creativity and never get it back. Fight this downhill tendency as much as you can by upholding the value of active wonder. Constantly remind yourself of how little you truly know and of how mysterious the world remains. Daily Law. Reality is infinitely mysterious. Let it continually fill you with awe. Remind yourself of how much more you still can learn. Mastery, Chapter 5. Awaken the dimensional mind, the creative active.
And that was the Daily Law for March the 8th from The Daily Laws by Robert Greene. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, Bishop Robert Barron.
Everything around me, whatever exists, is already the gift of God. That's what creation means. God is the one who brought the whole of finitude into being. This world is not just dumbly there. It's there as a result of God's initiative, of God's grace. More to it, everything in me. So I'm seeking God with my mind and my will and my passions and so on. Well, where did my mind and will and passions come from? It's not like I just happen to have them and now God's out there and boy, I'm going to make my way to impress God. No, I'm the contrary. My mind, my will, my energy, my passion, everything in me is always already the gift of God.
And that was Bishop Robert Barron. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now, the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Quote, "The men who are not interested in philosophy absorb its principles from the cultural atmosphere around them, from schools, colleges, books, magazines, newspapers, movies, television, etc. Who sets the tone of a culture? A small handful of men, the philosophers." Unquote. And that was the Ayn Rand thought of the day. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now we pick up where we left off with the 33 strategies of war.
In essence, what Caesar was doing here was occupying his enemy's flank. Instead of attacking them frontally and engaging them directly in battle, he would take their side, support their causes, give them gifts, charm them with words and favors. With Caesar apparently on their side, both politically and psychologically, they had no front to fight against, nothing to oppose. In contact with Caesar, all hostility toward him melted away. This way of waging war allowed him to defeat the militarily superior Pompey. Life is full of hostility, some of it overt, some clever and underhanded. Conflict is inevitable. You will never have total peace. Instead of imagining you can avoid these clashes of will, accept them, and know that the way you deal with them will decide your success in life. What good is it to win little battles, to succeed in pushing people around here and there, if in the long run you create silent enemies who will sabotage you later? At all cost, you must gain control of the impulse to fight your opponents directly. Instead, occupy their flank, disarm them, and make them your ally. You can decide later whether to keep them on your side or to exact revenge. Taking the fight out of people through strategic acts of kindness, generosity, and charm will clear your path, helping you to save energy for the fights you cannot avoid. Find their flank. The support people crave, the kindness they will respond to, the favor that will disarm them. In the political world we live in, the flank is the path to power. By Julius Caesar. Let us see if by moderation we can win all hearts and secure a lasting victory, since by cruelty others have been unable to escape from hatred and maintain their victory for any length of time. This is a new way of conquering, to strengthen one's position by kindness and generosity.
Keys to Warfare. The conflict and struggle we go through today are astounding, far greater than those faced by our ancestors. In war, the passages of armies are marked with arrows on maps. If we had to map the battles of our own daily lives, we would draw thousands of those arrows, a constant traffic of moves and maneuvers, not to speak of the arrows actually hitting us, the people trying to persuade us of one thing or another, to move us in a particular direction, to bend us to their will, their product, their cause. Because so many people are constantly shifting for power, our social world becomes blanketed in barely disguised aggression. In this situation, it requires time and patience to be indirect. In the daily rush to move and influence people, the subtle approach is too difficult and time-consuming, so people tend to take the direct route to what they want. To convince us of the correctness of their ideas, they use argument and rhetoric, growing ever louder and more emotional. They push and pull with words, actions, and orders. Even those more passive players who use the tools of manipulation and guilt are quite direct, not in the least subtle in the paths they choose. Witness a few of their maneuvers, and they are rather easy to figure out. The result of all of this is twofold. We have become more defensive, resistant to change. To maintain some peace and stability in our lives, we build our castle walls ever higher and thicker. Even so, the increasingly direct brutality of daily life is impossible to avoid. All those arrows hitting us infect us with their energy. We cannot help but try to give back what we get. Reacting to direct maneuvers, we find ourselves dragged into head-to-head arguments and battles. It takes effort to step away from this vicious arena and consider another approach. You must ask yourself this question. What is the point of being direct and frontal if it only increases people's resistance and makes them more certain of their own ideas? Directness and honesty may give you a feeling of relief, but they also stir up antagonism. As tactics, they are ineffective. In war itself, blood war, not the interpersonal wars of everyday life, frontal battles have become rare. Military officers have come to realize that direct attack increases resistance, while indirection lowers it. The people who win true power in the difficult modern world are those who have learned indirection. They know the value of approaching at an angle, disguising their intentions, lowering the enemy's resistance, hitting the soft, exposed flank instead of butting horns. Rather than try to push or pull people, they coax them to turn in the direction they desire. This takes effort, but pays dividends down the road in reduced conflict and greater results. The key to any flanking maneuver is to proceed in steps. Your initial move cannot reveal your intentions or true line of attack. Make Napoleon's manœuvre sur le derrière your model. First, hit them directly, as Napoleon did the Austrians at Caldiero, to hold their attention to the front. Let them come at you mano a mano. An attack from the side now will be unexpected and hard to combat. At a palace reception in Paris in 1856, all eyes were on a new arrival on the scene. An 18-year-old Italian aristocrat called the Countess de Castiglione. She was stunningly beautiful and more. She carried herself like a Greek statue come to life. Emperor Napoleon II, a notorious womanizer, could not help but take notice and be fascinated. But for the moment, that was all. He tended to prefer more hot-blooded women. Yet as he saw her again over the months that followed, he became intrigued despite himself. In events at court, Napoleon and the Countess would exchange glances and occasional remarks. She always left before he could engage her in conversation. She wore stunning dresses, and long after the evening was over, her image would return to his mind. What drove the emperor crazy was that he apparently didn't excite her. She seemed only modestly interested in him. He began to court her assiduously, and after weeks of assault, she finally succumbed. Yet even now that she was his mistress, he still sensed her coldness, still had to pursue her, was never sure of her feelings. At parties, too, she would draw men's attention like a magnet, making him furiously jealous. The affair went on, but before too long the emperor naturally tired of the countess and moved on to another woman. Even so, while it lasted, he could think of no one else. In Paris at the time was Victor Emmanuel, the King of Piedmont, the Countess's home. Italy was divided into small states like this one at the time, but with France's support, it would soon become a unified nation, and Victor Emmanuel harbored the secret desire to become its first king. In her conversations with Napoleon, the Countess would occasionally talk of the King of Piedmont, praising his character and describing his love of France and his strength as a leader. The emperor could only agree. Victor Emmanuel would make the perfect king of Italy. Soon, Napoleon was broaching this idea with his advisors, then actively promoting Victor Emmanuel for the throne as if it were his own idea. And eventually, he made this happen. Little did he know, his affair with the Countess had been set up by Victor Emmanuel and his clever advisor, the Count de Cavour. They had planted her in Paris to seduce Napoleon and slowly insinuate the idea of Victor Emmanuel's promotion. The Countess's seduction of the emperor had been planned like an elaborate military campaign, right down to the dresses she would wear, the words she would say, the glances she would throw. Her discreet way of roping him in was a classic flanking attack, a seductive manœuvre sur le derrière. The Countess's cold beauty and fascinating manner drew the emperor on until he had advanced so far that he was convinced it was he who was the aggressor. Holding his attention to the front, the Countess worked to the side, subtly conjuring the idea of crowning Victor Emmanuel. Had she pursued the emperor directly, or suggested the crowning of the king in so many words, not only would she have failed, but she would have pushed the emperor in the opposite direction. Drawn forward frontally by his weakness for a beautiful woman, he was vulnerable to gentle persuasion on his flank. Maneuvers like this one should be the model for your attempts at persuasion. Never reveal your intentions or goals. Instead, use charm, pleasant conversation, humor, flattery, whatever works, to hold people's attention to the front. Their focus elsewhere, their flank is exposed. And now when you drop hints, or suggest subtle changes in direction, the gates are open and the walls are down. They are disarmed and maneuverable. Think of people's ego and vanity as a kind of front. When they are attacking you and you don't know why, it is often because you have inadvertently threatened their ego, their sense of importance in the world. Whenever possible, you must work to make people feel secure about themselves. Again, use whatever works. Subtle flattery, a gift, an unexpected promotion, an offer of alliance, a presentation of you and they as equals, a mirroring of their ideas and values. All these things will make them feel anchored in their frontal position relative to the world, lowering their defenses and making them like you. Secure and comfortable, they are now set up for a flanking maneuver. This is particularly devastating with a target whose ego is delicate. A common way of using the flanking maneuver in war is to get your enemies to expose themselves on a weak salient. This means maneuvering them onto ground or luring them to advance in such a way that their front is narrow and their flanks are long.
And that was the next part of Chapter 18, Expose and Attack Your Opponent's Soft Flank. Back in a minute. Thank you. If you're a Democrat, you need to vote Republican and become a Republican because President Biden is not only the face of the country, the leader of the country, but he is the titular head of the Democrat Party. And what he does reflects on the Democrat Party and everybody in it. So right now, the Democrat Party is a party that wanders around not knowing where it's going, what it's doing, or what it's saying. It is brain-addled. And you, as a voter, deserve better. That's why you need to vote Republican. Back in a minute. Thank you, thank you. In order to win, I must defeat the voters to defeat the office holders. Nancy Pelosi is only as strong as her support. I know that the vast majority of Nancy Pelosi's support is from the useful idiots. I know that the useful idiots are easy to defeat because they rely on talking points. I know that simply contradicting the talking points is enough to stop the useful idiots. I know that winning is about stopping the useful idiots, not necessarily converting them. Back in a minute. Thank you. Facts are fine, but propaganda is power. Nobody cares about the facts. Yet, Republicans are bound and determined to pound a square peg into a round hole and force people to accept the facts. Propaganda is power because all democracies are fundamentally about popularity, and popularity has nothing to do with facts, and that's whether you're dealing with people or ideas. Republicans need to save the facts for courtrooms and embrace propaganda in order to win. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now we pick up where we left off with policecraft.
12. The kids. Fresh. I have this dream. Chucky. Yeah, like what? Fresh. Nothing. Sometimes I have it, that's all. Sean Nelson as a 12-year-old drug dealer. Fresh. Cops don't want to deal with juveniles. I heard of one SF officer who kept seeing an 11-year-old driving his family's car through the neighborhood. Just park it, man, the cop pleaded, no doubt anticipating the typhoon of police reports, babysitting, and notifications that would accompany a juvenile arrest. The kids, they don't make any sense. One youthful offender I know took off his felony ankle monitor, which automatically triggered a warrant for his arrest. His reasoning? It didn't look right with his shoes. Best case scenario, juvenile criminals don't grow up to be adult criminals. Because you've seen that before. Seen the kid who started out snatching purses and, a few years later, graduated to full-on murder. So you put some work into connecting with the kids to make your relationship with them as positive as it can realistically be. But it's a prematurely weathered crowd, and some of them are so angry and distrustful of authority that they treat your efforts as part of some larger conspiracy, or receive you with an attitude that oscillates between stony nonchalance and outright hostility. Why the fuck are you even talking to me? One teen from a tough block asked in exasperation when I attempted to strike up a conversation about something other than his lengthy arrest record. He was shot dead on the same block a few months later. For others, you don't even try, because you have to be able to recognize a lost cause. Like the teen rapist with the spiky hair who is always sniffing wood glue. That kid is probably on his own. But if it looks like there's an opening, sometimes you'll take it. Pick a youngster as your personal project and keep tabs on him. Encourage him. First, you need to separate the kid from the pack, so there's no more audience to impress, no more show to put on. What follows varies depending on the officer. My former partner, Rolf Mueller, arrested a 15-year-old once after the boy's struggling single mother called the police because she found drugs in his room. The boy admitted to the possession. He was respectful and doing well in school. In the war on drugs, he didn't quite seem to be the face of the enemy. Rolf wrote him up for the dope, took him home, and wrote out a code of conduct for him to follow. I will abide by my mother's rules. I will respect myself and others. I will not hang out with thugs. Rolf had the boy sign it and gave the signed copy to his mother. A code of conduct. It was something only Rolf would have thought to do.
maybe it would take hold. I've had a standing offer with many teen offenders. If they can go a year without an arrest, I'll buy them lunch. And not fast food either, but a halfway decent place. If they make it to college, I'll pay for their first semester of books. Over the course of my career, I have given out a number of business cards with these pledges and promises written on them. Haven't gotten any calls back yet, which means no one has made it that far. They lost my card, they didn't believe me in the first place, or maybe all three. But I'll keep trying. A lunch or some books isn't going to magically transform someone's life, and if the only thing I've accomplished is to show them the police aren't quite the opposing force they thought they were, maybe that's something. And I probably do it more for me than for them. And my wife likes it too, which counts for a lot, like a better chance of there being blueberry pancakes for breakfast on the weekend. But one of the reasons my phone isn't ringing is the rotten company these kids keep. The broken school they go to, where as long as they aren't fighting, the teacher doesn't care what the hell they do. It's the bleak neighborhood they're mired in, the father they don't know, and the mother they wish they didn't. This city is killing them. You want to scoop them all up and plop them down on a ranch, in a place where they can work with their hands and learn discipline and fortitude and all those other rustic values that people like me want to impose on people like them. The kid that Rolf tried to mentor, some months later, we would see him standing outside a known crack house in the company of some other slouching teens in hooded sweatshirts and baggy pants, a freshly minted gang tattoo on the side of his neck. He had not, in fact, turned his life around. Rolf recognized him and pointed him out to me. I remember there was a catch in his voice. Doesn't mean you don't hand the next youngster a code of conduct. You always work for the future. I keep giving out the cards to kids who are consummate question marks. Maybe they'll always be hustlers. Maybe they'll join a youth choir. There's no way to know. But I'll give them out even if they don't work, even if they don't mean much of anything. Because if I'm gonna go down, I prefer to go down swinging. I was a big brother in Milwaukee's Big Brothers Big Sisters program for 5 years. After I moved to California, my little brother was sent to state prison for reckless homicide. I visited him the last time I was in town. We still write. I still send him food and clothing. You don't give up on people when they're family or close to it. Maybe you're not allowed to. But at the same time, you realize there are no guarantees. You want to do all you can to avoid arresting a parent in front of their children. No child should have to see that. But sometimes you'll have to. If possible, you let the arrested parent talk to their children for a minute before you lead them away. Let them give assurances that both they and their kiddos are going to be okay. Depending on the timbre of the situation, I've told children that their parent was coming with us because your dad is giving us a hand with something. Or I've told them their mother isn't a bad woman, but she just needs some help. I'm not sure that's always the right way to go, but I'm reminded of something my mother once told me. She said that sometimes you have to shield children from the way life is, until they're strong enough to face it. As a patrol cop, you will be called to the maternity ward of a hospital to assist Child Protective Services, CPS, when an infant has tested positive for opiates, usually meth or cocaine. CPS typically places a 72-hour hold on the child pending an assessment because of the substantial risk that the infant could suffer harm if left with the mother. Your department's Special Victims Unit will start a child endangerment investigation, which typically involves a blood draw warrant. You tell the mother she cannot leave with the child. Some give you pushback. Others accept this news with a shrug. Under California law, you are also obligated to tell the parent that a written statement is available explaining her rights in this investigatory process. This statement is available at all public schools, probation offices, and welfare departments. I'm not sure how far an informational brochure goes in fixing something this broken, but the law is the law. Whether this mother is arrested depends on jurisdictional factors and the best interests of the child. Arresting new parents still in their hospital gowns, recovering from recent labor, isn't always the best way to go. And as I write this, the effects of opiates on newborns are still not well known. The New England Journal of Medicine published a study in 1985 that suggested cocaine babies would have birth defects and developmental disorders, which touched off a firestorm of outrage about crack babies. But it used a small sample, 23 women, and has since been widely called into question, especially because it's difficult to separate the specific effects of drugs on babies from the effects of the general poor prenatal care that many addicted birth mothers practice. And prenatal exposure to opiates is nowhere near as potentially damaging as, say, fetal alcohol syndrome. Pediatricians will tell you that many addicts give birth to healthy babies. But that's still not quite cause for rejoicing. Psychological effects aside, the cold truth here is that you're still looking at a newborn whose mother chose to ingest a corrosive street drug while pregnant. That living environment is just one of the many hurdles the child is going to have to clear if they are to make it in this world. The main goal of child welfare agencies is to preserve the family unit whenever practical, but some families need to be split up for the good of the child and, further down the line, for the sake of public safety, because damaged kids who remain in damaged homes get older and damage others. Around and around we go. Back at the station, you write your police report, which will have a vague and antiseptic title like Aided Case that in no way reflects the enormity of this situation. What the report should be titled is Mother Damns Newborn, or The Police Will Be Seeing a Lot of That Kid Starting in Around 13 Years. And when you get to the place in the report where you are to write the name of the child, you call them Baby Boy or Baby Girl and add the last name of the mother, because most of these children haven't been named yet. It makes you ponder how you would have fared in life if you had such a beginning. Would you still be a cop? Or would you be slumped next to a shopping cart of your belongings, a needle deep in your arm? Are drugs still a victimless crime? Not today. So welcome to the world, little one. It's going to be hard for you out there. You're going to have to be stronger than you know. Good night, and good luck. In an effort to end this chapter on a more upbeat note, here are some Halloween safety tips to keep kids safe during trick-or-treating. Stay bright. I read of one mother who suggested telling her child there is a secret order of ninjas who wear only yellow. Use reflective tape and have your kid carry glow sticks or a flashlight. Keep costumes short so they don't trip. Institute a no running rule. Know that it will be broken frequently. Go with your kids until they're at least 10 and stay in a familiar neighborhood. Check all candy. The razor blade in the apple is an urban myth, but kids under 3 are at higher risk for choking, so remove hard or gummy candy and bars with nuts. When my older daughter was 3, she dressed as a policeman girl for Halloween and called her handcuffs her handcups. What does that have to do with safety? Nothing. I bring it up because it's empirically adorable.
And that was Chapter 12, The Kids, from Policecraft by Adam Plantinga. And I like this book because there's usually so much humor in it. This chapter seemed to have been an exception, and apparently he was aware of that, and that's why he put, obviously, that little bit at the end about Halloween. So, but again, that's why I like this. And it also gives us insight into law enforcement. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there, and reminding you that you are not neutral and that the government has no rights.